So it looks like we got some new intro music. That being said, today on the House of Takes pod, I wanted to get into the shifting media landscape. That's right. Yes, of course, we're going to talk about Shannon Sharpe. We're going to talk about Stephen A. Smith's love of Shannon Sharpe. We're going to talk about Skip Bayless, Richard Sherman, and who else in their right mind would actually want to join Skip Bayless on the Undisputed Show. Thanks so much for tuning into the House of Takes pod. I'm Dave DeBon. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please go ahead and subscribe. Look, we're over 800 subscribers. Not bad for a couple of months. All right, on to the content we go. I thought I would play a video from Friday first for you that Stephen A. Smith put out. Let's go ahead and play that.
Let me get right into it, because I know that news has been percolating over the last few days that Shannon Sharpe is coming to First Take. I'm not going to tell you that's true. I'm not going to tell you it's not either. What I can tell you is that the honchos are talking to Shannon Sharpe. What I can tell you is that the honchos are fully aware that Stephen A. Smith wants Shannon Sharpe on First Take. I want Shannon Sharpe on First Take, and I aim to get him. We are definitely talking to Shannon Sharpe. The conversations are official. The reports have not been misnomers or misreports or anything like that. We are talking to him, and I'm hopeful, very hopeful, and very confident that ultimately we will be announcing sooner than later that he will be on First Take. Anything can happen now, because I don't make those decisions. I have bosses. But damn it, Shannon, Club, Shay, and anything else, I don't give a damn if he brings a bottle of Hennessy with him. I want him on First Take. All of this politically correct stuff and being quiet, I want Shannon Sharpe on First Take. Okay? Period.
So clearly, as water is wet, it's one of my favorite lines from a Bruce Willis movie. I have to say it is clear to me and clear to anybody that watches that Stephen A. Smith absolutely wants to have Shannon Sharpe on First Take. Now, a little bit of history here for you on this particular topic. Now, we know that Shay made his announcement that he was leaving Undisputed. We know that Stephen A. Smith put out a video on his Stephen A. Smith podcast, which, by the way, is sponsored by the FanDuel Network. I'm just saying, Stephen A. Smith's own podcast is sponsored by the FanDuel Network. It is not a ESPN podcast. More on that a little bit later in the show. So Stephen A. Smith on his Stephen A. Smith podcast came out and said originally that they'd love to have Shannon Sharpe on the show. He was then forced by, I'm assuming, somebody over at ESPN who said to him, you can't say that. You have to go back and say something different. So Stephen A. Smith went back and he basically said he'd love to have Shannon Sharpe as part of ESPN. Yes, he'd love to have Shannon Sharpe as somebody that would sit in occasionally or once a week as a co-host on the show, simply because he loves the current format of the show. The show's format, as you know, is it basically has a different co-host every single day for Stephen A. Smith to go up against. So Stephen A. Smith took the ESPN line and put that back out on his Stephen A. Smith podcast. I know this gets a little bit confusing. So this was a couple weeks ago. Now, the video we just saw sort of is a complete 360 degree or 180 degree change, if you will. Stephen A. Smith is now saying he would love to have Shannon Sharpe on First Take. Now, I don't know if that means Shannon Sharpe would be there every day on First Take, or if it would be something where Shannon Sharpe would be there 3 days a week on First Take or twice a week on First Take. One thing is for sure that the folks over at ESPN are not going to spend all of that money on Shannon Sharpe to just have him show up on Tuesdays, if you know what I mean. Look, Shannon Sharpe did a really nice job over at Undisputed. He did a nice job holding his own in a way against somebody that, quite frankly, is very difficult to hold your own against. Look, Shannon Sharpe potentially joining ESPN's First Take had a bunch of momentum Wednesday through Friday last week. My guess is that a offer is impending. I would be willing to bet that at some point this week we will hear something about Shannon Sharpe officially joining ESPN one way or the other. That being said, what happens to good old Skip Bayless over at Undisputed? And I should say, real quick, if you have any comments on any of this, please drop them in. Look, would bringing Shannon Sharpe onto First Take actually cause you, the viewer, to actually tune back into First Take or not? As for Richard Sherman potentially joining Skip Bayless on Undisputed, that seems to be the best option for Skip Bayless at this point because clearly there's nobody else that appears to be actively throwing their hat into the arena. One of the problems with Skip Bayless is that you have to have somebody go up against Skip Bayless who has extremely tough skin and is going to be able to to basically survive the nonsense of Skip Bayless, because Skip Bayless will sit there at home with his pad of paper and come up with a bunch of nonsense that he knows is going to cause anger throughout the sports media landscape. And you have to have somebody that can actively dispute what Skip Bayless is saying. Now, Skip Bayless does have some good points every once in a while. Skip Bayless clearly knows exactly what he's doing. Skip Bayless knows his brand. And in order for Skip Bayless's brand to work effectively, you have to have somebody there that can actually go head to head with him. Now, Fox Sports isn't calling me anytime soon and probably not calling any of the 150 plus better YouTubers than myself that are out there that could actually hang with a Skip Bayless. There are plenty of people in North America that could actually do battle with Skip Bayless on a daily basis. The question is, can you find a big enough name who's most likely a former player, and I've certainly never played in the National Football League or in the NBA, to actually go head to head with him? Who would want to tarnish their image going head to head with a guy like Skip Bayless on a daily basis? I think Richard Sherman would be a fantastic choice for Skip Bayless and Undisputed. The big question is, does Richard Sherman actually know anything about the National Basketball Association to be able to hold his own? We certainly know that Richard Sherman can hold his own about the National Football League, but I personally do not know if Richard knows enough about the NBA. Now, I put out some other podcasts on this topic a while back. One of the questions I got was, why doesn't Skip Bayless do what they did on First Take and go ahead and have a different co-host every single day on the show? And the answer to that question is two fronts. First front, when Shannon Sharpe left, they could have chosen to keep this show going with fill-in co-hosts. You would have thought that that would have been the thing that Skip Bayless and the executives over at Fox Sports wanted to do. But that didn't happen. And possibly, and I do mention this, possibly one of the reasons for that is that the folks over at Fox Sports can't find five people willing to go head to head with Skip Bayless, even if it's once a week. Look, this whole Skip Bayless thing is amazing to me. And the fact that Fox Sports went ahead and sort of pulled the plug. Now, I know they have other things going on in their network in the month of July, such as a lot of soccer for the American audience, a lot of soccer going on during the month of July and August. One thing is for certain is that the folks over at Fox Sports most likely are going to settle on one person who is hopefully not going to be a sacrificial lamb going head to head with Skip Bayless. All right, tell me what you think, North America. I want to hear your thoughts on who you would like to see go head to head with Skip Bayless on Undisputed. As for ESPN, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Now, Stephen A. Smith has his own podcast, the Stephen A. Smith Podcast, which happens to be a completely separate entity from ESPN. The folks over at ESPN made some wise decisions along the way, and one of those wise decisions was to allow some of its superstars on the network to venture outside of the ESPN network. This is a smart move by ESPN in a landscape, a media landscape that has completely shifted over the last 10 years and seems to have accelerated that shift significantly since the introduction of COVID. So Stephen A. Smith having his own show outside of the network makes a lot of sense, which, by the way, is one of the reasons that the folks over at ESPN will put a lot of value on Shannon Sharpe. Club Shay Shay is a significantly bigger entity at this point than the Stephen A. Smith podcast. And the folks over at ESPN absolutely know that if they bring in Shannon Sharpe to go head to head with Stephen A. Smith at least a couple times a week, it will be of great benefit to the First Take show. I've covered the ratings before. I'll do it super quick for you again. 400,000 average audience members show up to watch First Take on a daily basis in the month of June. In January or in December, you can expect those numbers to climb close to 1 million. Now, just imagine what happens if Club Shay Shay brings all of his Club Shay Shay people with him. Will those numbers go considerably north of 1 million viewers in December? And I think the folks over at ESPN are absolutely willing to bet yes on that. All right, that's it for today's House of Takes pod. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please go ahead and subscribe to the show. Hey, for the House of Takes, I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.